here we go. It's the Bhoycie Bus, the Tuesday ticket. It's about a billionth show in the last 3 weeks. Just when we thought it was going to be a quiet summer, just when we thought we were out, they dragged us right back in. Jonathan, we're going to finish up at 7:30 tonight. There is the Scotland game on. I'm very conscious of that a lot of people will be wanting to watch it. It's funny that Scotland win a few games, everyone kind of wants to watch them play. And then they'll go back to being shite soon and they'll be paying attention if anybody cares, mate, all over again. But yes, we will still be talking more excitement about Brendan Rodgers. See this? Look, how does headphones do that?
Oh,
like they're all twisted. All I do is I finish, I sit them in the flare, I pick them up. Like, what's happening here with these? Like, and they're that twisted round. Like, there's no fixing this now, mate.
You need to get yourself a wireless set. That's what you should do. You should treat yourself over the summer.
No, because you can't use a wireless one on this mic.
You need to upgrade things and get like a wire.
The mic's the one
wireless all round. That's the future. There's no need for wires.
I like wires, man. I am
old
wires.
school. Old school.
Right. Old school. Thank you. Enough of the old. Right, let's get stuck into it. We will do all that good stuff. Subscribers, by the way, what's happening? All you new subscribers, hello. Welcome aboard. We do appreciate it. It's jumping like mad, mate. Honestly, my phone's like a wee
madness. Madness, the numbers at the minute.
It's like a wee hot potato on my wee phone with all the amount of subscribers that keep adding. I think we're up to, let's have a wee look. I'm not rush. I'm not over it. I'm not trying to be like, hey, welcome to the Bhoycie Bus tonight. I'm just like trying to take it easy these days, Jonathan.
Mellow, you know.
Mellow. Enough excitement. 3,835 we're up to, man. 3,835. That's good, eh? That's jumped up loads recently. How many has it jumped up by? Because it tells us in this wee thingy. So in June, we've went up 174 subscribers. It's only the 20th of June, only 2/3 of the way through the month. So a big thank you to you all who have done that. If you want to give us a wee like, a share, slag my hair, then you can do so as well. Or you can become a Bhoycie Bus member, like Tattoo Face 77, like Pam, like Stubbsy's Horse, like Phil McGinley, like Martin Kay, like Stephen Murdoch, like San Fran Celtic, like Stevie Kenny, like Teresa Lyle, Patrick McLaughlin, so many more. It's $1.99 a month. Content will always be free. It's just you keeping the wheels on the road. We don't expect you to have to pay to listen to our dulcet tones. Finally, we can just seen a funny comment I'm going to bring up in a wee minute as well. Finally, though, let's not forget, Jonathan. It's been a horny summer already, being a Celtic fan. You can get that wee bit hornier if you head along to ED Pharmacy. Scan the QR code. Do it now. ED Pharmacy, or go to the website edpharmacy.co.uk. Any erectile dysfunctional needs you have, people say that. I mean, I think dysfunctional does them a disservice. Maybe it'll just make you function that bit better. You know, let's be positive here on the bus, you know. Head on there, they do same-day delivery, 7 days a week in the central Scotland area. Obviously, the order cut-off is 6 o'clock. If you're not in the central Scotland area, then they try to deliver within a day, discreet packaging, all that carry on. And it's the only blue thing we will champion on this channel. But thanks to you, honey bastards, if you use the code BUS10, they extended it for the month of June, that you get 10% off there, and plenty of you have, I am hearing. Love that. I love the fact the bus is full of honey bastards. I think it's great. So it makes me have faith. Like, because you just see no folk by names and tiny wee like circular avatars, Jonathan, where it's like, I'm now beginning to like go, I knew I'd put my faith in this lot for the right reasons. You know what I mean? They're all just naughty bastards. It's brilliant. More of the same. Keep it going. Right, okay. Brendan is back. The announcement was yesterday. Let's be honest, Jonathan. It's the guy who was number 1 on the list, but now he is back. It is a bit like the return of the Mac. Take it away.
Yeah, Russell, Celtic did have their eyes keenly set on Brendan Rodgers, and that much has been clear for the past couple of weeks. Celtic's infatuation with their number 1 target has indeed paid dividends. And when Celtic were looking for a managerial appointment, it's no surprise in this game of romance and Celtic's lust for silverware of late, they have went and turned to a man who knows how to deliver silverware by the treble in Brendan Rodgers. But when it comes to, a relationship such as this, when you go back to your ex, there is always these two things you have to consider, and that is sacrifice and compromise. Celtic have decided to sacrifice a little bit of their pride by going back to Brendan and put the past behind them, albeit it seems like some of the fan groups may be a bit slower to show that same faith. We'll see what happens there. But compromise is the one we are going to be discussing this evening, because tonight we have to wonder, what compromises did Celtic have to make to seduce Brendan back? Brendan brings the silver, which is what Celtic wants. But what can Celtic offer to Brendan that Brendan wants, that's made him sign up to another 3-year relationship with the football club? Can't wait to get into all of it this evening.
I always get the fear when you bring up exes. I always feel like you, even when you're doing a monologue like that, Jonathan, that there's a slight glint and smirk in your demeanour that you can't even help. You just kind of go, that wee idiot over there. Anyway, we'll get stuck in. And you're absolutely right, because yesterday we had a wee look at what the reaction we thought would be from the media, what we thought the reaction would be from the fans, what the bold shift in attitude had been we spoke about as well. And I thought it was great to get those three prisms. One we've not really done the big deep dive into. And I say a deep dive, and it'll be like 10 minutes, do you know what I mean? Like Camden. But like we would do, I do want to get your thoughts on Brendan Rodgers' motivations for this. Now, it's great to go, see, he's a Celtic man. He's a Celtic man. And that's a brilliant wee, thought to have. And I do believe he is a Celtic fan. I do believe it. That's not me just already, drowning myself in soup before anyone gets started. I think he said things when he left the club that's proven true. He would always go back to Celtic if he got a chance. Celtic's the team he supported. That's all good to me. There's got to be more than that, though, because there was more than that for why he left. He left for a professional decision. He's 50 years old. Not, at the very end of his manager career. In fact, if anything, he's probably at the peak of his powers. And he's decided it's Celtic he wants to go back to. Now, that professional pride and that quite obvious, I think, career drive that he has won't have gone anywhere. Albeit, neither will his emotional attachment to the club. But this isn't an hour of needy having to come back in. This isn't like, I couldn't let them down, do you know what I mean? They're in fucking disarray. We're in a position of strength. And he knows the backlash that occurred after he left. He was well aware there was obviously targeting of family and things like that all went on as well. And he would have seen the banners. He'll be acutely aware, I would imagine, of the amount of times he's been called a rat on social media, things like this. So what we have to now work out is, what are his motivations for coming back? And what assurances did he want? What guarantees did he want? What demands did he make, if any? How's this played out? I want your thoughts first, that this becomes something that 4 years, 4 months ago wasn't enough. Leicester meant more. To 4 years, 4 months later now, exactly where I want to be again. Because, in fact, just go on.
Yeah, well, I think when you're looking at Celtic in their position now, I think we've seen over the last few years, I think the board have got a far more right under Postecoglou than they were getting right towards certainly the end of Brendan's spell as manager. And I think, after that disastrous COVID season, there has been better decision-making around the club, albeit perhaps Ange Postecoglou was a bit of a fortuitous one to fall on as the manager. I think everything since then has been done very well. I think he's also got the guarantee there of Champions League football, which we've banged on about before, is always going to be a big selling point for a club like Celtic. He's not having to negotiate those qualifiers again, so he knows he's going to be playing with the big boys and a chance to put Celtic back on the map, because I think from Brendan's point of view, Brendan is probably, I would say, the most egotistical manager that we've had in my lifetime. Not there's anything necessarily wrong with that. You need to have a big ego, I think, to take on the job in the first place. But I think Brendan comes back, and I think he's coming back almost looking to cement his legacy. I think he would have been aware of what had happened the last time that fans maybe did turn on him, and maybe history wouldn't have been quite as kind to him if he'd ended his whole ties with Celtic, a few years back when he moved to Leicester. And I think him coming back now gives him a chance to right that wrong, firmly etch himself in the fans' minds that he is indeed, a Celtic legend. And, the way of doing that is going to be seeing tangible progress in Europe, because that is something Celtic have not been able to do in such a long time. And it's all there as a club at the moment. They've got the guaranteed group stages, they've got the cash in the bank from so many different, sponsorship deals, the fact they're going to be playing Champions League football again for the second year in a row. I think there's also, going to be so much potential with the squad. I think it's better than the team that he left, back in 2018, 2019. I think everything going back towards that time was, that team was pretty much in a decline when Rodgers left. Whereas I look at this team now, and I think this team is very much on the rise. There is so much untapped potential in it. You can look at players in that team and you think, Brendan Rodgers, for example, with the likes of a Jota will come on miles under a Brendan Rodgers for me. I think it's going to be the same for a few of the boys that are in that team now. And I think the fact when you get somebody like Brendan in, and the fact his name carries so much weight in the world of football, I think that will attract better qualities of players that might not have considered Celtic if it was a different manager at the helm. And I think Celtic will have had to have given Brendan assurances there that he's able to go out and get the players that he wants to bring in, because ultimately, domestically, Brendan Rodgers has done everything there is to do domestically in Scotland. So that's, for me, not the reason he's going to be choosing to come back. He's not got... The only thing domestically that Celtic really want to chase down is really 10 in a row, and we had the chance and we didn't take it, and we're miles away from that now. So it's very unlikely Brendan Rodgers will hang around for another 8 years, win the next 8 league titles, and correct that wrong from the past.
Don't be disrespectful.
Be careful what you wish for. but I think when you look at it, I think he's going to be looking at Europe, and the only way you're going to get Brendan Rodgers back at Celtic was to have offered him a sort of transfer budget that he's probably went and asked for the summer before he left the first time around. And I think Celtic, and particularly Dermot Desmond, were quite keen to offer him that. And I think that is probably the biggest compromise Celtic have had to make, where I suspect transfer records may well be broken this summer. I think wage brackets may well be broken this summer. I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if we managed to hold on to most, if not all, of our key assets as well as part of these assurances Brendan's been given, unless obviously a crazy offer comes in and we can't knock it back. So I think from all that sort of point of view, Russell, going into this summer, I actually think it's now 10 times more exciting than it was a few weeks ago when we thought Andrew was going to be looking at doing it. And this promises to probably be the most exciting summer as a Celtic fan for as long as I can remember.
I think you've nailed it in terms of the summer stuff. I totally agree with that, by the way, because that I was literally speaking on the phone just before we came on, and I was saying I'm more excited now than what I was at the near the end of the season. And this is the thing, when Brendan looked at the opportunity that arose, this wasn't a job he was looking for, not because it was Celtic. He wasn't looking for a job, full stop. So that took convincing in the first place. Obviously, that's where the emotional factor, I think, then creeps in, and he goes, okay, we'll make allowances with Celtic. And anyone who thinks of Crystal Palace and all that wouldn't have had him high on the list to try and drink. We could ask him, not necessarily that he would want them, but any of these clubs in England that are looking, I think Leeds are linked, Championship, behave. But I think Celtic were the exception to the rule for him. And once then he started speaking to them, though, what he does, which I agree with, is he then goes, okay, I might be interested in doing it, but if I'm doing it, we're doing it still going to be like, you're going to have to start pulling in the same direction that I want to go in. And I feel that Brendan's motivations for coming have to be beyond, winning the League Cup in October and stuff. Like, that's not going to be, that's going to be something he wants to do. Get the first trophy. We know the importance of, we'll dress it all up once we're at the Champions League anyway. But,
That League Cup final becoming the biggest game of Brendan Rodgers' career
ah,
in October.
landmark moment. But I do think that when we consider the reasons for him coming back, it has to be something different from what he'd done before, because yes, I think eventually at some point in his career he would have wanted to have done it all over again because he had such a great spell. But to be his first job back after the job he left us for, that tells me there's got to be more on the plate. What's his motivations for this? He was taking a year out, and that tells me whatever has been presented to him and whatever it is he's pushed for, there's been a heck of a lot of, compromise, like you were talking about at the beginning. There's been a heck of a lot of, Desmond going, fucking right, I actually agree with you anyway, Brendan. Let's get this show on the road again. Do you know what I mean? This isn't happening again. Like, once you're in the door, we're gonna make sure that it doesn't, that this will not be the summer of 2018 all over again. Trust me, we're not going down that road. And that's maybe been a big part. Europe's obviously going to be a massive focal point for him. And I think that's something, if you are a Celtic fan, you can't deny that over the last 20 years, the domestic dominance has been bliss. But since our last European final, they've been in two. And neither time have they been in any sort of financial, fiscal, brilliant nick that we all speak about so glowingly with the Celtic board. Yet they managed to get to two of these finals. So what are we doing wrong? And whilst they may well throw the kitchen sink, or what's left of the kitchen sink, at all the managers every time they get the job, because that's all they can do, I think we need to be, whilst not irresponsible, I do feel we need to be willing to now start offering, a wee bit more to managers to get this job done to a better level than what we've seen, because there is evidence that we could make an impact. There is talk, Jonathan, about a European final, 5-year plan, things like that. I hope these are assurances. I hope these are discussions that we've had with Brendan Rodgers, because to me, that would then mean that sort of symmetry between an alignment between the board's hopes and aspirations for the club and Brendan's. And I think, I know it sounds ridiculous because there is balance to both sides. I don't think he covered his own glory with China. I've said that before, with the Chinese opportunity, then sort of whispering to Moussa Dembele, you'll be coming with me. I don't like that stuff. But I also think his hopes and aspirations and where he viewed Celtic being able to get to or go to as a club, I don't think he went off piste on that. I think the board changed their direction or slowed down the bus, if you like. And I think they sort of put the brakes on. I think Brendan was pretty consistent on the evolution. Now, I watched one of his interviews. There was that Oxford one we were talking about last night. I watched about an hour and a half of it last night. And he says there's one thing in football that he refuses is when clubs stand still. He says, once they stand still and they stop evolving, I can't do it. Like, it just doesn't work for me. He goes, everything's got to be constantly going like that. And I watched that, I thought, I wonder if he's talking there inadvertently. Again, not bad mouthing Celtic, but if he's referring to Celtic when he's saying that. And you couldn't help but feel that he was when I watched that. And that was only 2.5, 3 years ago, so I needed that Oxford University interview. Very good. It's worth a watch if anyone's not seen it. It's on YouTube. Just type in Brendan Oxford, it will come up. But when he spoke about that, it's got to be constantly evolving, or it doesn't work for me. I don't do sitting still. It doesn't. That's just not how anything should really operate. And I look at that and I go, so that tells you he's been told something different again then, like by the board than what he was getting told the 4 or 5 years ago. So I think it's quite exciting, the fact that his interest has peaked so much, don't you?
Yeah, I think given the fact that it did look like he was going to take some time away from actually management, that Celtic will have had to have put something to him that is really going to have given him food for thought, if you like. And as I say, I think with Brendan Rodgers, he's definitely comes across as a very ambitious manager. He wants to do the best he possibly can at any club, but he also wants that club to progress to be the best club they can possibly be. And I think that's always came across with anything that he's ever done as a manager. And I think, when he's looking at it from Celtic's point of view, I think he probably feels there was unfinished business the first time around. There was more that Celtic could have achieved, but for one reason or another, the board didn't share my vision. And if I'm going to be going back in here, we all need to be, singing from the same hymn sheet, and making sure that we're, going to go for the sort of players and calibre of players that can actually take us to the next level in terms of European football. But I think, as well as that, I think he has bigger visions more than just the footballing side of it. I think he'll also look at, the whole club as a whole, and look at different departments within the club and try and bring across better standards there where he can. I think he tried to do that the first time around, and I think there has been a bit of a legacy left from how he approached things the first time around as well. And I've no doubt he'll look to do those sort of things again, because for me, Brendan is somebody that's always going to want to have, a big part of Celtic's history. I think that's something that is important to him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bothered coming back to begin with. He's already said, he's a fan, and I don't think that's really anything that he was making up. There might have been a few other porkies he's told throughout his time, but I think the one thing that is quite clear is that he was a Celtic fan, still is a Celtic fan, still wants what's best for the football club, and he's got to be looking at this. And I genuinely think Celtic were probably the only club realistically that were going to come in for him this summer that would have got him to turn his head a little bit, which is credit to the club that they've been able to put that to him. But I think it's also credit to Brendan Rodgers that he's willing to, come back in. And let's not forget, Russell, he knows he's coming back in, and he knows there is, an element of the support that probably are going to be a bit sceptical towards him to begin with. Whether that actually translates into the atmosphere at the pitch, hopefully it won't. I really don't want to see that happening, and hopefully it'll just kind of blow over on social media over the summer months rather than us, fighting amongst each other when the season starts. But I think Brendan Rodgers has to be aware that there is an element of the sport that probably didn't want to see him come back. But he's still, got enough about his convictions to believe that him coming back in is the best thing to be doing for himself and for the football club. And I genuinely think this time around, provided the board back him, he has a strategy in place. He's a master strategist. He's proven that time and time again throughout his managerial career. He's always got ideas as to how to progress clubs and make them the best they can possibly be. If Celtic have bought into his vision, I have no doubts at all that this spell will be even more successful than the last one. And you could see something extremely memorable happen. He took Leicester to a European semi-final in his spell there. And, there's nothing to suggest to me that he couldn't take Celtic to the latter stages of European competition next season. I think we were all waxing lyrical about the performances under Ange Postecoglou in Europe. But, Brendan Rodgers, who just gets a bit more of a tough time for his European record, actually finished with more points in his Champions League groups than Ange Postecoglou did last season. And, I think the styles of football are quite similar. So I think if Brendan Rodgers is able to bring in the players that he wants to bring in, I think, the sky's the limit for what Celtic could achieve next season. And as I say, it goes right back to this summer, being so excited to actually go ahead and watch. And, for Brendan, there has to be assurances there. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken on the challenge whatsoever.
Well, speaking of assurances, Football Scotland, and I think a few reports were suggesting £30 million is going to be the budget for Brendan. Where they get that information from, we could all I suppose we could all write that down in the back of a fag packet and say, yeah, it's going to be 30 million. Let's just put it to print. Fuck it. Maybe that is the case. Let's just say it's true for the sake of the conversation. Let's say that is one of the assurances he's been given, that there is going to be a substantial budget. And let's just say, for argument's sake, it is £30 million. I feel last summer I was banging my head against a wall trying to explain how Jordan Larson would have been value, not expenditure for Celtic. I thought from a marketing point of view, I thought from, more importantly, on the park point of view, I was like, 3 strikers isn't a lot for a club to carry that. To me, and I kept saying it, I went, if you think this manager's as good as he is, which I kind of do, I think you're insulting Ange a wee bit to think that he can't manage 3 strikers. Turns out they might have been right, because he got rid of Giakoumakis and brought in he wanted to just run with 2, which I thought was stupid, just my opinion. But that was ahead of a Champions League campaign as well. And I just thought, something like that, I go, that just makes sense to me. Yes, it might be a big outlay in wages and things, but you'll get a return on it. You'll get a return on the shirts. You'll get a return on the hype. Do you know what I mean? Like, honestly, bums on seats. You see anyone with the name Larson on the back and, whatever number he is, and Henrik standing there, he's praying. And I just thought these things make sense to me from even a business point of view. It still makes sense. And a lot of people are like, oh, whoa, we couldn't afford that. We can't do that. We can't do this. Now, it'd be very interesting in saying then, how would you feel if we spent £30 million then this summer? Are you comfortable with that? Is everyone's sort of mood changed? Are they beginning to adapt that in the modern game, 30 million isn't all that much? Celtic makes a hell of a lot of profit every year. Has a heck of a high turnover for a football club, and has operated in very safe spaces for a heck of a long time. There is obviously the guarantee for the second year in a row of group stage Champions League football, a luxury for the first time we've ever been afforded, guaranteed group stage without having to play any sort of qualifier. And to me, I personally look at £30 million and go, fucking right, give him it. That's what the money's there for. It's there to be done. If it is 30 million, it's just argument's sake. But if that's something that he's been assured, I've got no qualms with that, no issues with it. No one wants the club to be reckless, but you do also want a club to counter that has a bit of belief and a wee bit of bravery about it as well. And I think what's happened over the last decade, 15 years, is fans, particularly the newer generation, have become conditioned to kind of look at everything from a prism that they shouldn't really feel that they have to. The fans do their bit. It's then on the board to do theirs to provide the best product for their customer base on that park. That's not a silly argument to make. It's a sensible one. It's just common sense. And I feel at times the stuff that happened, with them going bust, is this really lazy argument that means we can't do this because we don't want to end up like Sevco or like the old Rangers, whatever. And it's like, that can't be the go-to argument for if we're this progressive club that is evolving all the time. Then the first sign I've seen that we are now maybe finding ourselves into that space is the fact Brendan's now broke the wage structure already in his own pay packet. No problem with that. No problem with that. That then gets mirrored into the transfer window. If he gets 30 million, are you comfortable with that sort of number getting bandied about, Jonathan? Or are you still, no, I don't mean still, are you part of the gang that panicked at Jordan Larson maybe getting 45,000 a week last year? Which, one summer apart. And I just feel like I'm trying to be as consistent as I can in what I believe Celtic are capable of doing and sustaining, because the more you invest, the better the product will be in the park, the more success you'll have, the more regularly you'll be in the Champions League, and it keeps going. Or do you get the fear when you hear figures like that, and are you on the cautious side?
Well, I think I would certainly suggest that sort of money should be getting spent. I would think I would have been suggesting that even if Ange Postecoglou had remained as Celtic manager this summer. I felt Celtic were in the need to do some big spending if they were going to show that we're really committed to trying to give Europe a go. Because I think it's been Terry that's been saying, for a number of months now, how big this summer window was going to be for Celtic, that they actually went out and invested in the squad, and we're going to find out just how seriously the club wants to take European football. And I think, when we're looking at it from that point of view, Celtic have to go out and be willing to spend money. £30 million might sound a lot in the context of Scottish football, because it is a lot of money in terms of just purely Scottish football. But in the grander scheme, if you're looking at Champions League level football, it's peanuts, mate. It's absolutely peanuts. It's not going to make a huge dent for most clubs. Most clubs will way surpass that spend that are in the Champions League. The vast majority will spend over 30 million comfortably. I would hazard a guess this summer. So I think from a Celtic standpoint, if they want to kind of work within their budgets, and £30 million might sound a lot, as I say, it's still within Celtic's budget quite comfortably to be able to afford to spend that. And you've got to look at somebody like a Brendan Rodgers, who's got an eye for a player, and he's very good at developing players. I think that's where he excels. Then I think, I would have no issue with him going out and spending that type of money over the summer window, because for me, it's all about trying to improve the squad. And it's like anything else, to improve, you have to be willing to invest, and you're always going to have to continually be willing to invest in any business if you're wanting to improve the outputs. And, to improve the outputs, Celtic are going to need to do something they haven't done for a long time. But I fully suspect that in the summer window, Celtic may end up breaking their transfer record. That wouldn't surprise me at all, because it's like we said at the start, this isn't a Brendan Rodgers coming into a Celtic team that needs radical surgery. This Celtic team, we all think, is pretty good. We thought, last year under Postecoglou, we had a chance at second in that group. A lot of us,
We
certainly
did have a
third.
chance. We did have a
Yep.
chance at second in that group.
Exactly, and I think there was, there was maybe a bit of a shifting of the goalposts once results started not going our way, and we decided we were going to just say it was all about more performances than results last season. But I think, under Brendan, if he's able to keep a hold of the players he has, which I suspect he will have, because I suspect that'll be again one of the assurances. He's already watched Celtic, remember, Russell, at close quarters this season. This isn't Brendan Rodgers coming in blind to what Celtic have. He was at the Cup semi-final already this season. He'll be acutely aware of how good this Celtic team is.
Was he at the cup final too?
I think he might have been.
Was he not like the SFA, like an ambassador or something for the SFA?
They squeezed him in. The more I look back on it, the more I think, I wonder if there was a bit more to this than meets the eye from back then.
The conspiracy begins.
I know, Brendan's already been just gently getting himself back in. They've pulled a blinder. They've put Martin O'Neill out there as well, so that we all get distracted by O'Neill and forget Brendan's even there half the time. Martin O'Neill's the one taking the plaudits just to make sure Brendan gets an easier time of it. But the fact is, he's seen the team play a few times already. He's already going to have a good understanding of just how good this team is. You give him sort of £30 million, he can then afford to just spend that money on a few key areas that need to be improved, rather than having to go out and say, here's 30 million to spend, but you need to revamp your full team and, bring in 10 players for £3 million each. He can probably look at it and think, I only really need maybe 3 or 4 players here with this budget to actually do it. So that means you could very well see a 10 to £15 million signing, I think, this window. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I think the wage budget, again, will get pushed. I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if you see somebody on a record wage at Celtic in terms of player this summer. I think that's, again, a possibility. And again, I just think these are all things that have to have been discussed for Brendan Rodgers to have even considered the job in the first place. And, he has to have had those assurances given by the board that if he identifies someone this time around, and it's fucking somebody that we don't do what we did with fucking John McGinn a few years back. We don't heckle over a few £100,000.
That was a personal thing, though. That was a difference. So that was a personal thing. That was Lowell and his name escapes me. Rod Petrie, or whatever his name is. They had a personal thing. That's ridiculous.
It's irrelevant, though.
It's irrelevant. It should never get in the way of business. Should never get in the way of business.
Yeah, so I mean that's irrelevant. I don't think. Hopefully, whilst Lowell's still in situ, hopefully his involvement is now minimal, and he just sits as the chairman and doesn't get too heavily involved in any of the transfer dealings. I kind of always feel that no matter what happens in the second spell with Brendan, if anything does go wrong at any point, Lowell might end up becoming the fall guy for this. But Celtic have brought that on themselves by bringing him back in, but that might be being unfair on Peter Lowell, because he might be completely uninvolved in this now. He might well have taken a back seat, but the fact his name's still there would make me think that if things did ever go sideways in Brendan's second spell, people are going to turn around and blame it on Peter Lowell, whether that's correct or whether it isn't. But you know what? When you're looking at the team, I think Brendan Rodgers has got to have had those assurances that he can go and spend however much he needs to spend. Because for me, I only think we probably need 3, possibly 4 players, provided we don't lose any over the summer. So that gives them a massive budget to play with to get those players in. And I think Celtic fans would trust Brendan with that type of money as well. I think the board, Russell, I think that'll be more interesting. I think the board would probably be more likely to put their trust in Brendan than they would have been with Ange Postecoglou with that money for some reason as well. I just think Brendan Rodgers might be able to identify somebody that is a bit more of a familiar name. And not that necessarily needs to be the case, but I think it always provides a bit more reassurance when there is a lot of money getting spent that they've maybe proven themselves in a market that we are more familiar with, rather than overseas in a market where we don't really know what we're buying. So when you're weighing all that up, I would be very surprised if Celtic don't do some serious business this summer.
There will be serious business done. I mean, no doubt about that. He's not came back not to, wants to get, let's get to work, let's get down to business, and I think he will very much do that. A couple of Leicester players been linked already. I think that's, folk can call it lazy journalism. I think there'll be an element of truth, though, in the fact that he would look at Leicester, a relegated
Mm-hmm.
team. He'll know if there's any break clauses in any contract, so you can get players maybe a wee bit lesser than what they would normally. Well, they'll cost less anyway because they've been relegated, but also notwithstanding that, some of them might have relegation release clauses as well, which might be something that he'll be more than acutely aware of, if that's the case. Ndidi being linked, Amarty being linked already. Again, it could just be fucking blindfolding yourself and picking names. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go back to that club though for at least one. Because I'm sure there was a hell of a lot of good times there, mate. Not just this. Don't define him leaving in March after being the only manager last summer in the EPL not to pay for a player. In fact, he got one on the final day of the window. First player he paid a fee for, or that Leicester paid the fee for, was then on the final day of the window. Up to then, he's the only manager in the league, and like his hands were beginning to get tied. I think a lot of the guys there that were at that club over the good years, two fifth place finishes, Europa Conference League semi final, FA Cup winners, Community Shield winners, I think they look at it and go, he's fucking good. And an opportunity to work with Brendan tends to be something that people like to do more than once. And several players that have proven that over the years. I wouldn't be against that. One guy whose name, and this is a bit of fun, we will round up just in 7 minutes' time at half past, because I know there will be a lot of people keen to watch the Scotland game. But one name that's going to keep cropping up, and I suppose there's two sides to the argument. I've just been ranting about, the Jordan Larson debacle last year, which I felt we could have pushed the boat out. I didn't think, in my opinion, Andrew would have wanted someone with a more iconic name, or a massive, like a bigger sort of love in
Mm-hmm.
for than what he was getting. I think that's just a personality trait he's got, just an opinion. Uh, I think Brendan would want the big names there. Now, if we can make up with Brendan, I'm just playing devil's advocate because it comes up in the live chat that much. This is not my personal opinion. Let's just throw it out there though, because it gets bandied about enough on Twitter and in the live chats with the passengers on the bus. I mean, when you think about it, if Brendan and Celtic, who seem so far removed from each other, a few years ago, can rekindle and have so many of us back on board, I mean, is there a way, if we just stay consistent in what we've said tonight, and we do not let personal issues get in the way of business, he couldn't get Moussa back, could he? Could he ask the question?
It
Could
goes.
could Brendan Rodgers play his biggest Jedi mind trick of all time and get Musa back? One of the reasons I ask is not just all the comments about Musa, and I know it's far fetched, right? Don't worry about that. It's just a bit of fun. But I was watching the 5 best Rodgers games that Celtic posted today, and you went, fucking hell. He was so good, man. Like,
Mhm.
so good. Like, and I know that, I think it would be very difficult for Brendan to convince Musa, but you just don't know. If we can't have it both ways and say that emotional pull of Celtic only works one way. Musa tweets about Celtic and talks about Celtic more than Brendan does. All I'm saying is there could be a phone call to be made.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that word again that we were talking about at the start of the show, compromise. Could there be a compromise there? The ultimate compromise, where Brendan Rodgers and Moussa Dembele somehow get the band back together. I think Brendan, I wouldn't be overly surprised if Brendan was to ask the question. I think Brendan isn't
He's
above
not afraid to
asking the
ask it.
question.
He's
I
not
don't think
afraid to ask
Brendan's.
it.
Yeah, I don't think Brendan would be shy on asking the question. I think Brendan would look at somebody like Dembele and think, I might have some skeptics here, coming back into the building. And Rodgers is maybe thinking, not only will this improve the team, getting somebody like Moussa Dembele in, who for me would instantly be the first choice striker because I think he's better than what we have. But you also look at it and think the optics from the fans' point of view, if there's people that are still unsure about why Celtic went back to Brendan Rodgers, if Brendan Rodgers is able to get a name like a Moussa Dembele or somebody of that ilk, somebody of that star quality back in, then I think that does start to sway around any of the skeptics and amongst our support that exist, because they're going to start thinking, okay, he's back, and he's back to actually make a statement even more than last time because he's managed to get a big name player in. If it turns out to be Dembele, it would be absolute fireworks from day one, and that would draw a crowd, I think, for Dembele getting
It'd
unveiled
be
at Celtic
nuts.
Park. It would be
Nuts.
huge. It'd be
If you've
huge
got
because
30 million to spend and he's a free agent and he's 50, 60 grand a week, he would come out with probably more than that he'd want. But see, you could just say, look, let's not fucking be silly here. But 60 grand a week, mate. Just come play for Celtic. That's not even eating into your transfer budget. Moussa and Brendan, that would be the summer of love that I was talking about yesterday. Celtic and Brendan are back in bed. In jumps Moussa. Fuck it. Three in a bed. Neat little one said fuck all. That'll be amazing, mate. And you're right, it'd be just box office, the whole thing. And I think you're right. I think it would be the biggest buy-in you could do. Fucking pick up the phone and ask him. He's a free agent up to now. Why not ask?
yeah, I totally agree. And I think from Moussa Dembele's point of view as well, I think some of his best years of his career were at Celtic. He certainly seemed to enjoy his time here an awful lot. And I think with him getting asked that question to come back, I think Moussa Dembele would look at that. And he'd certainly weigh it up. I think Dembele would have a good think about it. I'm not saying he'd necessarily take it, whether he'd be able to let bygones be bygones, and whether Celtic would offer him a package that he'd be happy enough to accept would be two possible stumbling blocks, two large stumbling blocks as to why the deal probably doesn't happen. But if we manage to pull it off and get Dembele to even start considering it, it would be huge, because for me he's probably defined Brendan Rodgers' first year along with the likes of Sinclair. And if he was to come back, I think he'd be tempted to, just because he had such a good
Ah!
time around the first time. Goals against Rangers, hat trick against Rangers, a couple of goals against Manchester City, goals in the big games in the Champions League. Mr. Dembele will look at that and think, okay, this club looks like it's actually now about to take itself even more seriously than before. I might not
And
like
by the
this
way,
guy, but he's a
here's
good
one other
coach.
thing. One other thing, right? Very quickly as well. What coach couldn't afford his wages? Wouldn't do the wages. Wouldn't do the wages. Who do you think made more last season when they were at their club? Who do you think was getting paid more than a week? Brendan Rodgers or Mr. Dembele?
Yeah, there you go.
I, I
That's
I I know whose money I'm on. Who was getting paid more last season at Leicester City than at Lyon, and trust me, it ain't Musa. So I'll leave you with that thought. You never know, mate. You never know. It's going to be the summer of love. We are going to definitely have a few situations, I think, where there's going to be slobber knocker episodes on the bus where we're talking about, can you believe we've done this? Will it be Musa? Probably not. But because it's been mentioned that much, I thought it'd be worthwhile talking about. We're allowed to be excited. It's not being silly. It's just being excited. We're all happy Brendan's back. We will be back, I'm sure, as well this week. Tomorrow we take a day off. Might try and do some sort of bus stop episode. We've not done that in ages. Tomorrow night, and then the TNF will definitely be back Thursday night with the forum to get all you guys' points in, and we'll be doing that for at least an hour on Thursday night. Jonathan, nice short one. Enjoy the football if anyone's watching the Scotland game. I'm going to make my tea. Take care. I'll see you all later.